Welcome. It's me, Aaron the Artist. Thanks for sitting down and drawing with me today. We're going to be drawing Mikasa from Attack on Titan, so let's get right to it. Now, we're going to be starting off this drawing with a simple circle, which I'm then going to divide in half. Now, don't worry too much about drawing a perfect circle. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you want perfect, you can just trace around a cup or something like that. You can see that I've then added a couple of markings to the drawing. We have got from top to bottom a mark where the hairline sits, a mark where the eyebrows are going to sit, then a mark where the nose will sit, and finally a mark for the chin. Before we move on, I just want you to notice particularly how low down on the circle that brow line is actually sitting. For a realistic face, you would usually draw that brow line at about halfway down the circle, but here we've drawn it considerably lower, and that's more because of the anime style of this character. If you look at a lot of screenshots from the Attack on Titan anime, you'll see that they have really quite large foreheads and the eyes sit really quite low on the face. The next thing I'm going to do is take just a little sliver off of the edges of the circle and then attach to that a sort of bucket shape to form the jaw that has a little pin right at the bottom for the chin. Now, I like to draw the eye sockets before moving on to placing the eyes. I find it much easier to place the eye sockets and then the eyes rather than just to draw the eyes straight off. It just helps me a little bit with the placement. In terms of the hair, we're just going to focus on the overall shape or silhouette of the hair first and then add those details later. You can see we've got that sort of sweeping shape. With the basic proportions of everything done, we can move in and start adding some smaller details. The nose is really quite simple to draw. We've just got a little dot for the nostril and then a kind of hook shape. Almost looks like a little letter J. In terms of the eyes, anime eyes can be really quite complicated. I find it easiest to first draw the basic shape of the eyes and then to add all those fancy anime details afterwards. So we've got these sort of rectangular shapes that slope outwards at the edges, and then we're going to add inside of that the iris, which touches both sides of the shape top to bottom. Once we've got that, we can add some thicker eyelashes. Now, Mikasa's eyelashes are much thicker at the top than they are at the bottom, so you can see me putting that in, and they come to a point on the outer edges. At this point, we can start to add the basic shapes for her clothing. And the important thing about getting three-dimensional clothing is thinking of it from the outset as a three-dimensional shape. You can see me thinking of the scarf around her neck as a cylinder that wraps around the neck and comes basically in two different pieces. Attached to that, we're going to have a cloak, which is folded again into a few different sections. The way to make these kind of folds interesting is to get a nice mixture of larger sections, medium sections, and really small sections. I did forget with this drawing to add her eyebrows, so we're just going to sit those right on top of the eye sockets. She only has thin eyebrows anyway, which is why they were so easy to miss. And with that, it is time to move on to drawing the hair. We can start with the fringe because that's the most distinctive part of Mikasa's hairstyle. She has this one large spike of hair protruding down between her eyes, and then a few spikes off to the left and right. Now, I am looking at a reference photo to get the general shape of the hair more or less correct, but you don't have to draw every single hair strand in exactly the same place as you find it in references, unless that's what you want to do, because your hair tends to move a lot anyway, and the shape of your hair is going to change from 1 second to the next as it moves in the environment. So you don't need to worry about getting it line for line exact, as long as you get the general style. Again, much like with the clothing, we want to start first by drawing the general shape, as I did at the beginning, and then gradually refining and adding those smaller details, trying to get a mix of larger shapes, medium shapes, and small shapes. Alright, well, we're just about at the point where we need to add some shading. And to do that, we're going to be switching from the normal HB pencil that we used to a darker, I believe it's a 6B pencil this time around. The first thing I do when I add shading is to draw in the eyes. The eyes are the most important part of an anime drawing typically, so I like to start by getting those in just so that they stand out the most. Once we've done that, I'm going to be creating what you might think of as a two-toned drawing as a first step. I'm going to be separating all the darks from the lights with a single tone. all of the shadows will be shaded just using one single tone. And then we'll go in and add more details from there. Now the point of doing this is just to get all the shading in the correct place, and once it's in the correct place, we can gradually add more and more refinements as much as we want to. This is a bit of a lengthy, time-consuming process to get all of those hatching lines in, so I'm just going to kick into time-lapse and we'll be back once that is done. We are just about done with our two-tone drawing now. You can see me just finishing off that final segment of the hair, so we're okay to slow back down now. What I did want to point out is that when I do these two-toned drawings, look how I've tried to keep all of the hatching lines going in that downward direction. Now, it's not important that they're going downwards specifically. You could go horizontally or you could go diagonally. What is important with this kind of effect is that all the lines go in the same direction. That allows you to create a sort of pleasing graphic look to the image. To my mind, at this point, all of the hard parts of the drawing are done. We've got the proportions in and we know where all the shading is going to go. You can add more or less detail at this point depending on your preference. You could stop here or you could continue adding more. On my part, I am going to start adding a little bit more shading. You can see that I've started to build that up on the scarf. And the way we're going to build up more shading is not necessarily by pressing harder on the pencil. We're just going to add more layers of our graphite. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the same hatching technique that we used when we were creating the two-tone section of the drawing, but we're going to hatch in different directions. So you can see me sometimes going diagonally, sometimes going horizontally. The more layers that you add going in different directions, the more rich and dark that the tone is going to appear. Just make sure that no one layer that you add is too dark, or make sure that you don't press too hard on the pencil for any particular layer, otherwise you get that nasty, shiny effect on the page. Again, this is probably the most time-consuming portion of the drawing, so we're just going to ramp up the time-lapse and we'll be back in just a sec. We are in the final stages of the drawing now. We just want to add a little final polish to things. I've switched over to a black colored pencil just to make things really pop off the page. And we're using the black colored pencil to get really dark, really rich areas in those key places. For example, again, we returned to the eyes just to make those eyes really pop off. We go over the jaw a little bit, the shadow around the nose. And then in addition to that, we're going to do the outline all the way around the character. I find that making the outlines slightly thicker than the lines on the inside has a really pleasing graphic look to it. This isn't really something that you see in the Attack on Titan art style, it's more of my own personal flourish. Okay, we're just about done with the drawing here. I'm just adding those very final touches. I just wanted to go over some of the things that I've done in time-lapse, because I really did quite a lot in the last 20 seconds or so. You can see me right in the crevices of the hair where it wrapped behind the head, adding some final really dark shading just to really push the depth of the hair. You'll also be able to see a jagged highlight in the top portion of the hair just above the fringe. You can see I've drawn that in there. Now, I always used to stress about the shape of those highlights. It actually doesn't matter what exactly the shape is. What matters is the position of it, and that you, again, vary the big, medium, and small shapes. I've also tapered off the line art on the left-hand side. All the light in this illustration is coming from the left, as hopefully you can see from the shading. And I like to reflect that a little bit in the outlines by having the outlines lighter on that left-hand side. That is just about everything With a pencil drawing, the thing is, you can often just keep going and going and going, and you could be working on it forever. You do just have to sort of, at some point, decide that enough is enough and to call a drawing a drawing. And I think we're going to do that now. We're going to call a drawing, and we're going to wrap things up. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you managed to learn something about drawing with me here today. If you're interested in my personal art, you can find all my personal art over on YouTube Shorts. If not, I'll see you again for another How to Draw video. Have a nice day, folks.